This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to our daily roundup. Today we explore how your eating habits might be accelerating the aging process, and look at the federal government's major shift in psychedelic medicine and drug policy.
Constant grazing may be making your cells age faster.
The FDA is fast-tracking 3 new psychedelic mental treatments.
Slowing your breath changes how you perceive others' emotions.
Moral anger makes people share low-credibility news stories faster.
A global study links habitual forgiveness to better well-being.
Certainty about your partner predicts long-term relationship happiness levels.
New policies are reclassifying marijuana and accelerating medical devices.
Eye contact determines if computer-generated faces look truly authentic.
Let's start with nutrition.
We often focus on what we eat, but scientists are increasingly concerned with how often we eat. In our modern world, food is available 24/7, leading many of us to graze throughout all 16 of our waking hours. The problem is that every time we eat, glucose enters the bloodstream, triggering insulin. This hormone acts as a master switch for cell growth and proliferation. While we need this to survive, constant stimulation leads to excessive cell division, which increases the risk of DNA mutations and cancer. It also fuels the growth of visceral fat, the dangerous kind that wraps around your internal organs. Experts suggest that our bodies actually need a break from digestion to focus on cellular repair and maintenance, which is vital for longevity.
Beyond the frequency of meals, the types of food and cooking methods play a massive role in biological aging. Through something called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These toxins are formed when sugars react with proteins or fats, a process called glycation. This happens more frequently when your blood sugar is high from refined carbs like white pasta or sugary treats. AGs are particularly nasty because they turn flexible collagen into a stiff, dry form, leading to wrinkles, stiff arteries, and even cataracts. Even how you cook matters. Grilling or frying meat at high temperatures creates these AGEs within the food before you even take a bite. Shifting toward a 12-hour eating window and reducing refined sugars could be the simplest way to slow down your internal clock.
Now to the FDA.
The Food and Drug Administration is taking a significant step toward mainstreaming psychedelic medicine. They've announced plans to accelerate the review of 3 specific psychedelic drugs developed by Compass Pathways, the USONA Institute, and Transcend Therapeutics. This move is part of a broader push by the Trump administration to expand access to promising but currently restricted medications for mental health. Specifically, the agency is granting priority review vouchers for a psilocybin product aimed at treatment-resistant depression and another for major depressive disorder. There is also an MDMA-like treatment being fast-tracked for post-traumatic stress disorder. While the FDA initially identified the medications without naming the companies, the developers have since confirmed they received these vouchers, which can significantly shorten the time it takes for a drug to reach the market.
This acceleration is a major signal to the biotech sector that the regulatory environment for psychedelics is shifting. For years, these substances were relegated to the fringes of research due to their legal status, but the clinical data has become too compelling to ignore. Treatment-resistant depression and PTSD are notoriously difficult to manage with traditional pharmaceuticals, often leaving patients with few options. By granting priority review, the FDA is acknowledging the urgent need for breakthrough therapies in the mental health space. These vouchers are highly valuable assets in the pharmaceutical world, often traded for millions of dollars because they guarantee a faster response from regulators. It suggests that we are entering a new era, where these once controversial compounds could soon be standard tools in a psychiatrist's toolkit.
Next, consider your breathing.
New research published in the European Journal of Neuroscience suggests that the rhythm of your lungs acts as a metronome for your brain, actually shaping how you perceive the world. Researchers found that deliberately slowing your breathing rate changes how accurately you recognize emotions on the faces of people around you. Interestingly, the effect depends on whether you are inhaling or exhaling at that exact moment. We already knew that humans perform slightly better on memory tests during inhalation, but this study shows that the pace of your breath reaches deep into the visual system. By stretching a single breath over 8 seconds instead of the usual 4, participants in the study experienced a shift in their snap judgments about others, proving that our internal physiological state directly filters our social reality.
The study used a clever design to overcome the fact that people naturally change their breathing when they focus on a task. Participants matched their breaths to visual cues while being shown pictures of human faces for just 1/10 of a second. This tiny window of time is where the brain makes its most basic emotional assessments. The findings highlight a top-down influence where the respiratory system coordinates the electrical firing patterns of neurons involved in visual processing. It adds a fascinating layer to why mindfulness and controlled breathing are so effective. They don't just calm the nerves, they actually recalibrate the brain's data-gathering tools. If you want to read someone's emotions more clearly, the way you are breathing might be just as important as the expression on their face.
Moving to social media.
We've all seen how quickly misinformation spreads online, but a new study in the journal Cognition and Emotion identifies a specific culprit: moral anger. Researchers found that when people feel morally outraged, they become significantly more impulsive and pay much less attention to whether a news source is actually credible. This is a distinct shift from other emotions like disgust. While moral outrage is often seen as a single feeling, it's the anger component that drives the rapid, unthinking sharing of false information. The study involved participants reading headlines that were modified to be false, ranging from neutral to severe moral violations. When the headlines triggered anger, the participants' ability to use mental shortcuts to evaluate the source's credibility essentially evaporated, leading them to hit the share button without a second thought.
This research is crucial because it explains why provocative content is so successful at going viral. Social media platforms are often designed to trigger these exact emotional responses because they drive engagement. When we are angry, our brains switch from a careful evaluation of content to a reliance on fast, emotional shortcuts. The lead researcher noted that this project was motivated by seeing how emotional content can escalate into online aggression. By understanding that moral anger specifically bypasses our critical thinking about source credibility, we can better understand the mechanics of the misinformation crisis. It suggests that the most effective way to stop the spread of fake news isn't just fact-checking, but finding ways to help users regulate their emotional reactions before they interact with a post.
Now, let's discuss forgiveness.
Can forgiving someone today make you happier a year from now? According to a massive study of over 200,000 participants across 22 countries, the answer is a resounding yes. Researchers from Harvard's Human Flourishing program found a clear connection between regular acts of forgiveness and an improved sense of psychological well-being. However, the impact isn't uniform. It varies significantly by nation and culture. For example, in some countries like South Africa, forgiveness appears to be a deeply embedded cultural attribute. The study focused on dispositional forgivingness, which is the habitual tendency to forgive others over time, rather than just a one-off event. They found that this practice leads to higher levels of happiness and lower rates of depression, while also fostering character traits like gratitude and a general orientation toward promoting good.
What makes this study unique is its scale and duration. By following people over several years, the researchers can see how the practice of forgiveness actually builds character and shapes a person's volitional life. It's not just about feeling better in the moment. It's about a long-term pathway to building a more pro-social identity. Interestingly, the psychological benefits were often stronger than the physical ones, suggesting that forgiveness is primarily a tool for mental and emotional resilience. The researchers are currently analyzing data from a third wave of surveys, with 5 years of data planned in total. This will eventually provide one of the most comprehensive looks at how a single moral practice can influence the flourishing of more than half the global population across diverse cultural landscapes.
Next, romantic relationship certainty.
It turns out that how sure you are about your feelings for your partner is just as important as the feelings themselves. New research in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships shows that confidence in your romantic evaluations predicts both relationship happiness and overall mental well-being. This involves a process called metacognition, or thinking about your own thoughts. Two people might both say they love their partners, But the one who is more certain of that feeling is more likely to have a relationship that can weather hardships. The study looked at nearly 500 adults in long-term relationships with a median length of over 14 years. Those who held strong opinions about their partners, meaning evaluations that were resistant to change, reported much higher levels of satisfaction and lower levels of stress.
This concept of attitude certainty has been studied in politics and consumer behavior for decades, but applying it to close relationships offers fresh insights. When you are highly certain of your positive feelings, those attitudes become more influential over your daily behavior and thoughts. You aren't constantly reevaluating the relationship when things get tough. Instead, that certainty acts as a buffer. The researchers used a semantic differential scale to measure these attitudes, asking participants to rate their partners on various opposite adjectives. The key takeaway is that doubt, even if the underlying feeling is positive, can be a significant drain on mental health. Cultivating a sense of certainty and reflecting on why you feel the way you do might actually be a secret ingredient for long-term romantic stability and personal peace.
Shifting to drug policy.
President Trump has recently upended U.S. drug policy with two major shifts. First, he has moved to reclassify medical marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. This is a massive change because Schedule 1 is reserved for drugs with no accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. Moving it to Schedule 3 acknowledges its medical utility and significantly eases the barriers for scientific research. At the same time, the administration is increasing the availability of certain psychedelics for research purposes. While this doesn't mean full legalization, it signals a much more permissive era for substances that have shown promise in treating mental health conditions. These moves have been long sought by advocates and represent a significant departure from traditional GOP drug policy, potentially opening the door for a new multi-billion-dollar medical industry.
In addition to drug policy, federal regulators are also fast-tracking the reimbursement process for medical devices. A new Medicare coverage pathway has been announced for devices that the FDA deems breakthroughs. Historically, there has been a long delay between the FDA approving a device as safe and Medicare deciding it is reasonable and necessary to pay for it. This new pathway aims to sync those two processes, allowing innovative technology to reach patients much faster. While some experts remain skeptical about whether this will fully solve the pipeline problems, it's a clear attempt to address industry complaints about the slow pace of federal bureaucracy. Between the shifts in cannabis, psychedelics, and medical technology, the regulatory landscape for healthcare is undergoing its most significant transformation in decades, driven by a push for faster innovation.
Finally, digital human faces.
As we interact more with digital characters in video games and therapy apps, the question of authenticity becomes vital. New research in cognition and emotion found that the direction a computer-generated character looks can make or break their believability. Direct eye contact makes simulated smiles and angry glares look much more authentic to human observers. However, if a digital face is expressing sadness, looking downwards actually makes it seem more real. This follows the shared signal hypothesis, which suggests that emotions intended to invite interaction, like happiness, pair best with a direct gaze. Conversely, avoidance emotions like sadness or fear look more natural when the eyes are turned away. Because these avatars don't have real feelings, they must rely entirely on these subtle visual cues to build rapport and trust with users.
The researchers used digital models specifically because they could isolate the perception of emotion from any actual feeling. This allowed them to test how we project humanity onto software. They found that even small details, like the crinkling of skin around the eyes, are interpreted as signs of genuine joy, even when we know we're looking at a machine. As virtual humans take on more roles in customer service and companionship, understanding these psychological triggers is essential for developers. If a digital therapist doesn't look down while expressing empathy for your sadness, your brain might flag the interaction as fake, breaking the sense of connection. This study proves that for a digital character to feel human, it has to master the complex social language of the eyes, matching gaze direction to the specific emotional intent.
That's our roundup for today. Follow us for your daily briefing on the stories that matter most. We will see you back here tomorrow.